If you frame the fiction well, it becomes a fact. If you frame the fact well, it becomes a fiction. Thereby the guilty can always be found innocent, and the innocent can always be found guilty. It all depends on how you design the crime and the notion of criminality. And if you introduce God and the divine into the mix, the whole thing becomes a crapshoot, reliant on numbers and which way the winds of futility blow. To be candid, truth is a terrifying proposition, limiting interpretation and the sweet mythologies of meaning, disassembling our notions of exceptionality and making our outcries of abuse nothing more than the howling of dogs, desperate to be fed, yet incapable of feeding themselves. And these days, there are a lot more dogs and a lot more barking, accompanied by the rabid repudiation of anything that calls to question our right to shit where we eat, while relegating the cleaning and the cooking to those we consider not good enough to sit at our table or put their lips on our meat while we savor our self-pity with our wine. I have walked with crippled gods who are terrified of the question and the right to question, masters of a universe underwritten by fear and fable, who claim solidarity with fools of the unique and the oblique, while standing tall and erect on a foundation of misrepresentation and misinterpretation, fumbling frantically through the pages of theories they didn't write, standing on a platform of proofs they are incapable of understanding or too blind to decipher. But if you say it enough times and find a good hook for the chorus line, you can engage a mantra without meaning and a pathway to the divine. Of course, my assertions come from that corner of the room where folks are unable to mask their fatigue when faced with the endless parade of declarations and denials that walk synchronistically in step with those flaws, foibles, and fallacies currently adhered to because they work so well for the short-sighted, the posturing, and the painfully pretentious. So, they turn off the harsh light of insight in deference to whispers by candlelight, feeling deeply felt fictions of love and need pouring from flesh, drowning from flesh, flesh to flesh, promising pageantry for the betrayed and the bereft, while asserting the incomparability of, and I quote, stolen moments and their right to the assertion that those moments will be saved and reclaimed for them and for us. Because they were, and they are, and they were meant to be ascendant as descendants of majesty and the majestic, shouting the viral outcry of a nation unwilling to be vaccinated against the virility of its own self-importance while ignoring the need for prophylactic caution when betting its own history, not for his sake, but for hers. You see, there is no validity to the contracts or the claims made in close-quarter politics. Pregnant promises and innocent compliances, willfully ignoring the validity of any assertions of rape or abuse, dutifully asserting compassion and care while withholding consideration until after the delivery, when the stains of afterbirth will make the small print illegible, ignoring the apparent and self-evident fact that daddy's unironed clothes have already been hung in the closet while her lover hangs post-apocalyptically from that tree that was used to make the diminutive and the challenged feel great again. The game of politics is a phallic overcompensation, a cultural artifact meant to minimize and overwrite any truth that finds us guilty, culpable, or willfully capable of the abuse we peremptorily view as the promise and privilege of youth, under the guidance of carefully crafted renditions of that very same truth. And yes, We are all cultural artifacts, represented as, interpreted as, given credence only if we accept ourselves as, pinups willing to be pimped out to serve someone else's need to release, that last twitch that says we're complete and replete, though none of us are really the pictures of the us that we splice together to entice the others of us that we splice together. You see, fundamentally, it's our fear of life and living that make us treat, chase, and conceive of ourselves with such pornographic certainty. Parts and sensations played with ceremoniously as we search for the climax of confirmation over and over again. Surgeons and resurgences used to confirm our sense of self, the power and the dominance of that self as a lasting and substantive diatribe regarding the truth of our fictions. Of course, having been born a potent impotency, I can only point the finger of my uncertainty at myself, unwilling though I've tried to fit my foot into the size 9 allotted to my kind, the cripple amongst cripples, the heathen amongst heathens, the abused abuser whose very presence reminds the blessed of that night that they didn't get it right, lingered too long and squeezed it too tight, asserting that their disability, their malformation, was due to the abuse of a nation that slept naked and was forced to fornicate with demons beneath the moonlit sky, naively believing that everybody else understood the meaning of their freedom, their function in the fable that was never their fable, and their place in the line that offered neither water nor wine. In other words, the dominance of the emotionally crippled and their right to determine and disincline those they considered to be the deaf, the dumb, and the blind. If you frame the fiction well, it becomes a fact. If you frame the fact well, it becomes a fiction, which explains the fascistic fragility of our current notion of freedom and our desperate need to redesign the glass and the mirror, overriding our inability and unwillingness to redesign ourselves. Why else would you need to blind the Indian and cripple the slave? Generation after generation, the same game and the same play. Generation after generation, the same game and the same play. Generation after generation, terrified that one day someone else will take the popcorn and walk away.